In this video, we're going to talk about consumer buying behavior. Now, of course, consumers and customers are different. Consumers are people who actually consume and use a product, where customers are the people who buy it. So you can be a customer and a consumer at the same time. You can be one, but not the other. Um, but we are, of course, very interested in the behavior of the final consumers. And these could be individuals or households. And there are many factors which will affect whether somebody chooses to consume a product or buy a product. Um, and of course, there are cultural factors. Whatever culture you grew up in and live in will affect what products you consume. For instance, food. Whether you prefer bread or noodles or rice will be dependent upon what culture that you were brought up in. And of course, every culture has subcultures and different sections of that culture that will affect our choices, as well as what social class we belong to. Social classes are fairly permanent striations or levels within a society that exist, and they're relatively permanent. So, however, you can move in between them. Some people usually try to move upward into a higher social class if that's important to them, and doing that, they often adopt the consumption practices of the social class that they want to get into. So that even if you're a social climber, it affects you. There are other social factors such as reference groups, who we identify with. Of course, our families affect us very much, as well as the role we have or the status we have that will affect us. People will, for instance, if they have a job with higher responsibility, sometimes just decide to dress a little different, a little better. Um, so these all affect us, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously. So also personal factors will affect us, such as our age. There are products at when we're younger that we're interested in, and as we get older, we tend to be more interested in other products. Also, the life cycle, where we're in the life cycle, which is connected with age, but it's not completely the same. Um, what I mean by life cycle stage is, for instance, we start out, we're single, and then we become part of a couple, maybe get married, have children. The ages of our children affect what we do. Then our children become adults. When my children became adults, my wife and I, our lives changed, because we were no longer dependent on, getting them to their events um, and the people we associate with a lot of other parents now, not so much. Um, and so that affects us. And of course, then there's, as you become a more senior citizen, hopefully I'm not too there too much, but certainly that affects the products we buy and use. Also, our occupation affects the products that we would buy, as well as our lifestyle, and certainly our economic situation. Economics have an enormous impact on what people buy, and that's no surprise to anyone. When people have more economic resources, they tend to buy more stuff, and or maybe more expensive stuff. And certainly our personality will affect things. There are some people who are very, um, for lack of a better term, materialistic. Other people not so much. And also self-concept. How do people view themselves? Um, and that affects the products they buy. Some people who are very fastidious, for instance, about their appearance, and they're very focused on what people think of them. Um, will buy certain types of products again. So these are all very relevant factors. And of course, there are psychological factors such as perception. And this actually kind of an extension of that same thing. How do people perceive themselves? and also what motivations do they have? Um, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about motivations when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which we'll do in a very shortly. And also, how do people learn things? How do people find out about new products? Do they how do they come across them? Do they seek them out, or they just come across them accidentally? Passively learning about them, and also beliefs and attitudes about products will affect various choices. And this is also and all of these kind of connect, because your beliefs and attitudes also would be a result of the culture that you were brought up in. And for instance, well, I'll go on that another time. Okay. I talked a little bit about social class. Every society has a social class structure. They're relatively, as I said, relatively permanent and ordered divisions, and members of certain classes tend to share similar interests, values, and behaviors. In the United States, we have 7 social classes. The highest is called the upper uppers. They are, as some people have referred to them as the 1%, the top 1%. These are people who are generally born into wealth. They've inherited their wealth. They did not earn it, most of it anyway, themselves. Donald Trump would be an example of this, but not necessarily a great example. He doesn't actually represent that group very well, but others, you may have heard of certain wealthy dynasty type families. The Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Kennedys. These somebody way back when made a lot of money, and the family has gone on. And interesting, generally the upper uppers don't actually like to show off their wealth. They're very conservative in terms of they're not showy, as opposed to the lower uppers, which is the sort of the next 2%, who actually often do earn the money themselves. Like Bill Gates would be an example of this. Bill Gates is one of the wealthiest men in the world, and at some point he actually was the wealthiest person in the world. He earned it himself. He, of course, is not an upper. He won't, but he's not allowed in certain clubs. It seems odd that he would be prevented from joining certain clubs, but the upper uppers have their own special clubs and act accordingly. And then, of course, the other 5. There's the upper middle class, lower middle class, the working class, lower classes. So I don't want to go through all of that, but that does affect what people buy and how they go for that. And it's not only money that affects it. I mean, for instance, there are people who are in the lower uppers who actually have much more money than people in the upper uppers. So it's, yes, income, yes, wealth, but also a matter of education and what types of occupations they have, as well as other variables. And people in certain classes, tend to be attracted to certain types of products, certain types of styles, that sort of thing. So that certainly affects, so depending on what product you're offering, that would tell you what type of class that you're probably going to be targeting. Needs affect what products people want, obviously. And we have here Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a very good model. And you may be familiar with it, sort of a pyramid shaped reference. So, for instance, if I were to take you and drop you on a desert island, what would your primary motivations be? Your primary needs would be? Well, obviously, there'd be things like, water, food, shelter, maybe clothing after a while. These are sort of basic survival needs. It's also referred to as physiological needs. things that we physically need to survive. Uh, well, and most of you, I mean, even though I can't see you, I'm pretty sure that you're surviving pretty well since you're watching this video. You're not out hunting and gathering. And if I were to ask you, how do you hunt and gather? How do you meet your survival needs? You would probably answer, well, you go to the supermarket and buy the food and so forth. And what do you use for to do the hunting and gathering? What tools do you use? Spear or bow and arrow or something like that? Well, you of course would laugh at that and say, well, I just use money, and money is the means of survival in a modern civilization. We don't actually have to hunt and gather for our food, at least in most situations. We hunt and gather money through a job or other means, and that's how we survive. So that's why money is a very strong motivator. Money also comes into play at other levels of the hierarchy. So, moving to our next level which is security, also, or safety and security. I would ask, what sort of products do you need to assure your security? Well, first off, what is security? Well, security is about the future. Am I going to be secure not only today, but in the future? And what sort of products do people buy, or products or services? Certainly, and if I were to ask you, you might say something, well, like locks or surveillance cameras or guns or things like that. But it's also other things as well. Why do people buy insurance? It's about security. You don't buy medical insurance when you're sick. You buy it because you might get sick in the future. Same with life insurance. You don't buy life insurance when you're dead. You buy it in the future. You buy it for the future. Actually, security is also why you're taking college courses. You don't actually need to take college courses to survive, but you're intelligent people and you understand that there's often a very competitive job market, and for that you need an edge. You need to be competitive, and therefore getting a college education, or at the very least some job training, would be very important to give you that advantage. And so that is actually fulfills the education actually fulfills a security need. Next, of course, is belonging, or our social needs. Human beings are very social creatures. I always thought that, God forbid I was ever sent to prison, I would want to go directly to solitary confinement to be away from all the other criminals who are probably far more dangerous than I am. That was actually a bad idea, because human beings often overestimate their ability to be alone. We are, as I said, very social creatures. Now, I generally don't mind being alone. For instance, when I became a consultant, I worked here from my office. My kids would go off to school. My wife would go off to work and to her job, and I would be here all on my lonesome working. And I didn't really mind that. Although after a while, I started to think things like, well, I should get out, and I should get out and do some networking. And I kind of thought of it in terms of a business need, but in actuality, I needed a little bit more socialization. So I started to join some various networking organizations, and we all generally do similar things. Maybe it's not a networking organization. Maybe it's maybe it's joining a club. Many of you probably are members of some sort of club. If not, maybe you're a member of a team, and sports is not just about the athletic aspect of it, but also about the social aspect as well. And the same with religion. Many people, if you look at most towns, you will find a church of some sort at the center of the town. Um, it's where a lot of people come together. Um, and it's not just about the worship, it's very much about the socialization. In fact, there are certain religions where you kind of go all day. There's a pancake breakfast, then there's the worship service, then there's a lunch, and there's an afternoon activity. There are certain religions where it's kind of an all-day thing. It's interesting, actually. I talked about I've joined some networking organizations, and this is a bit of practical advice here. If you join a networking organization, and it could be a professional organization for your particular profession, or it could be like a community business group, or some other type of group. My recommendation is go to the center of it, volunteer, get deeply involved, as opposed to coming to meetings and sitting in the back and being on the edge. That actually has very little value. It's not until you truly immerse yourself in that organization do benefits actually come. People get to know you. If you're looking for a job, they get to know you and trust you and say, "Oh, you'd be a good employee for my friend over there," or if you're looking for clients or trying to sell something, that's fine. I joined one particular organization. It's called NOAA, the Network of Writers and Artists. And within a year, and I was on the board. In fact, actually, most organizations I join, I'm on the board within a year. Not because I'm so great or anything like that. It was because I just volunteer, and these organizations need volunteers. So anyway, I joined this network of writers and artists, and it was business, business communications people, marketers, and so forth. Anyway, we're having a board meeting one time, and colleague of mine, her name was Melanie, was talking about the volunteer work she was doing for her church. And I thought that was very odd because I was pretty sure that Melanie was an atheist. And so this created a conflict in my mind. It's called cognitive dissonance, where two pieces of information don't go together. They can't exist well together. So to resolve this cognitive dissonance, after the meeting, I caught up with Melanie. I said, "Melanie, you're an atheist, right?" "Yes, I don't believe in that God stuff," she says. "Okay. Then why are you doing volunteer work for your church if you're an atheist?" And she said, "Oh, well, I just feel like I just enjoy being part of a community." No cognitive dissonance for her. And apparently, to be a Universalist Unitarian, you don't actually have to believe in God. So, and here's sort of the kicker. A few years, I lost track of her a little bit, but I caught up with her another time, and she said she shared that she was now a minister in that church and still didn't believe in God. She just, and honestly, what she just liked doing was officiating at wedding ceremonies. And I thought that was quite interesting. And that's purely to fulfill her social needs, her belonging, the belonging level of the hierarchy. If you think about this, there are a lot of products and services that we purchase to fulfill our social needs, belonging needs, both for both platonic and romantic. Think about clothes and fragrances. We want to make ourselves more attractive. So those are products that can help us do that. Obviously, things like cell phones and connecting, that sort of thing. Also think about like the dating sites, you know, Bumble and Tinder and Christian Mingle and All those, those help people connect, usually romantically, but and there are other, clubs and other things that enable people to get together, and so that fulfills our belonging needs. Then, of course, is our status needs or our ego needs. So, for instance, let's say maybe 5 to 10 years from now, I'm walking down the street and I bump into you. We haven't seen each other since you left school, but we have a nice conversation, and I can tell you're successful. You've done well. How would I be able to tell? What concrete things would I be able to see that would tell me? And you might suggest, well, uh, clothing, or maybe you have a nice car, or you have a nice house. These are status symbols, and there are many status symbols. Things like, well, for instance, having a higher degree. Um, for instance, I actually a few years back actually considered going back to school and getting my PhD. I thought it'd be really cool to be Dr. Bale, um, but I realized that it didn't make much economic sense because I was older, and how much longer would I be working, and how long it would take me to recover the cost of going and getting a PhD. But I still think it'd be cool to be Dr. Bale. And titles are often status symbols. It could be a job title. There's manager, supervisor, manager, director, executive director, vice president, CEO. You want the higher title. In fact, I had one friend who was job hunting, and he was offered two jobs. One job was the job was okay. It wasn't really what he was looking for, but it paid well. And the other job was work that he really would be looking forward to doing, but it didn't pay quite as well, and it was kind of evened out. And finally, he decided what to do. He went to the company that was offering less but the more interesting work, and he said, "I'll do it." I think that the job title was graphic designer, and he said, "I'll do it, but I want the title to be art director. Art director has more status. It's something that, and that would make him feel better." And I actually know a number of people who have actually refused jobs because of the job title, because it didn't have enough status for them. And there are other status symbols too, yeah, things like art, expensive possessions, having your own. This is not so much anymore, but having your own parking spot at your workplace. That's a status thing. At it might also be the size of your office. Whether you have an office at all. I mean, I know there are some people who have cubicles, and then there are other people who have offices. And I was thrilled when I had got my first office. That was enjoyable. I felt a little bit more important for that. And actually, it's funny. There is there's something very iconic about the corner office. People who don't even know where they'll be working, they say, "Someday I'm going to have the corner office," and it's they don't even know what building they're going to be in. But the corner office is special because in most buildings are rectangular, and there's a limited number of corner offices. There's only 4 per floor, and that makes it extra special. It's a status symbol. So, and there are many products that you can buy, and many products that are sold, offering status, expensive cars or things like that. Now, the next level we're going to get to. First, I'm going to do a little fantasy here. I'm going to wave my magic wand. Poof! Congratulations, you now have $10 billion. You're welcome. As I said, it's a fantasy, but If you were to actually, let's say, win the lottery and have, get $10 billion, well, all your other needs would be fulfilled. You will certainly survive. You would be secure. I mean, you could put the $10 billion in a low interest savings account and still live quite comfortably on the low interest that would coming out of that account. You would belong. Everyone would want to be your friend. You'll have long lost relatives, calling you up to say hello. Any status symbols you want, you can buy. Even if you wanted that advanced degree, like I was talking about, you could pay for it and, go through the program and get it. Very few status symbols would be, I can't think of any status symbol that would be off limits to you. So the question is, what would you do now? So let's imagine that you did have the $10 billion. Let's let a year go by. Let's say I assume that you will take care of your family. You'll pay off mortgages and student loans and things like that. You'll make sure everyone's comfortable in your family, in your sphere of people you care about. I assume that you will give to charity, and I also maybe also that you probably do some traveling. You go to see Paris or Alaska or wherever you wanted to go. So let's let the year go by and actually think about what would you want to do now. You don't need to work. You don't need money. You can buy all the status symbols you want. And this is actually a hard question. I find students have great difficulty answering this question. And actually what we're talking about is self-actualization. Self-actualization is doing things for yourself. I don't mean in a selfish way, but to actually like prove yourself, test yourself, to fulfill your self-worth to yourself. This is why, for instance, some people will climb Mount Everest. Now, it's not for the status so much, because the real status went to Sir Edmund Hillary, who was the first to climb Mount Everest. Now there's actually at Mount Everest, there's a line at the top, because so many people are climbing that mountain. But they're just doing it for themselves, to personally prove it to themselves that they could do it. At a previous college that I taught at, I was actually fairly friendly with the college president, a guy named Bill. Normally, faculty don't hang out with college presidents. Not that we hung out, but we were friendly. And part of the reason was that we had something in common. My nephew is a chef. He went to the Culinary Institute of America. He has cooked in several of the top restaurants in the country. All had 3 Michelin stars. And Bill's son wanted to be a chef and was considering the Culinary Institute of America. And so, really, well, my nephew went there, and I told him about what my nephew had done, and he said, "Oh, okay, that's interesting. Maybe we could get them together." I said, "Sure, absolutely." And we had telephone numbers and emails were exchanged, and kind of let them do it. Anyway, it was the beginning of the semester, and about 2 weeks in, there was usually a free food event, and if there's free food, I'm there. And so I got in line, and I think they were they're giving away hamburgers and hot dogs, and I get to the front of the line eventually, and who was flipping the burgers but Bill, the college president. And I said, "Yes, hey, Bill, I'll have 2 hamburgers, thank you." And I noticed he's wearing a Culinary Institute of America apron. I said, "Oh, so I guess your son went to Culinary Institute." And Bill said, "No, no, no. He went to University of West Virginia." I said, "Then why are you wearing the Culinary Institute apron? Usually that's something parents would get at the local college bookstore at the Culinary Institute." And he said, "Oh, no, no, I went there." I said, "What do you mean you went there?" "Yeah, I went there for a weekend immersion course in soufflés." And I thought that was quite interesting. Now, when he says he went for this course, it was not vocational training. He wasn't preparing to be a chef himself. He was a college president. When he actually the college shut down a few years later, he just went on to another college. He didn't go off to a restaurant to cook. This was self-actualization, because soufflés are difficult. They're difficult to do, them to cook and bake. They fall. You hear about soufflés falling all the time. They collapse. And he just wanted to do this. This was a challenge to him, and that's what self-actualization is. It's about personal challenge and personal accomplishment, not necessarily accomplishments that you're going to tout to the world. It's not necessarily a status symbol. So I guess my question is, at this point, which is the strongest motivator? And you might guess various things. You might say self-actualization. You might say survival. You might say something in between. And actually, it's kind of a trick question. The answer is the lowest unfulfilled need. The need, we actually have all of these needs at the same time, but what drives us most is the need that is lowest and not fulfilled. So if I drop you on the desert island, that low need that is unfulfilled is survival, and you need to focus on that as opposed to belonging or status or something else. The reason so many people have trouble answering the self-actualization question about what they do if they had $10 billion is that they're focused on something, lower down. And through my life and through your life, we will go up. We'll try to work our way up. Sometimes we'll fall down a little bit, and I'll give you a personal example. I was working for a corporation. I was surviving. I felt secure in my job and in other ways. Belonging. Well, I had a wife and 2 kids. I had friends at work, friends outside of work. As far as status, I had an office. I didn't have a cubicle. I had an office. That was for how old I was at the time, I felt that was fantastic. And what motivated me greatly was self-actualization. I wanted to push myself. I wanted to do things that nobody else was doing. I didn't want to do stuff that other people were doing. And so I was undertaking a lot of training for things that I was interested in. I built our company's first website. I did a lot of other things that were unusual. I tried to specialize, and I just mainly because I was interested in them, and I wanted to push myself. Not necessarily that it would always give me the status within the company. I could do other things that would do that, but I was very interested in that. Testing myself, pushing myself to do new things. I actually would blow out our department's training budget to the annoyance of some of my fellow employees. Just a little, again, a practical hint: if your company that you work for has a training budget, use it early in the year before the budget cuts come. So, anyway, one day, as I might have shared with you already or some other time, we got a new CEO, and 6 months later, he called us all into a big room and he said, "Hey, we're closing the New Jersey office. If you would like to stay with us and move to our new headquarters in Georgia, that would be great. Otherwise, have a good life." Basically, I found out at that moment I was going to be losing my job. I couldn't go to Georgia for family and other personal reasons. I was in the middle of my graduate school program. Just wasn't particularly practical. So essentially I learned I was going to lose my job. Well, while I had been motivated by self-actualization, I dropped back in an instant to drop down to security. I have a wife and 2 kids. I've got a mortgage. I've got to be secure. And so my focus became very different. Eventually, I started teaching, and I was teaching at a college, and I felt secure. I belonged. I had a certain amount of status. I was actually chair of the faculty committee at that school, and I was focusing on more self-actualization things. Um, I wanted to. I was starting to write books. I was actually designing courses, things like that, and I real things that were not necessarily typical, but I just wanted to learn how to do them. I got into develop working on things like college accreditation issues. That was kind of very cool. Um, and then guess what happened? They closed the college, and the same thing happened. I had to drop down to security and figure out how I was going to survive, and then work my way up again. Um, that will probably happen to you, um, and hopefully nothing too drastic. But there we go. So also you have to think in terms of what products and services, what needs, if your product and service that you're marketing, what needs does it fulfill in terms of Maslow or outside of Maslow? Um, what needs do consumers have that your product can fulfill? And then market accordingly. Now we also have to look at the decision process that consumers go through. And the first thing is need recognition. Whether it's we think in terms of Maslow, or we just think in terms of whatever it actually is. For instance, one form of need recognition is just realizing you're hungry. Oh, I'm hungry. I need something to eat. You'll realize that a consumer will realize they need something. And in fact, sometimes maybe it's not something they need that badly. So maybe you want to make consumers aware that they need this, suggest that they need it. Maybe it's a completely new product that they never even thought they needed. So once they recognize the need, they will start to search for information. And one thing we want to do is make sure the information is available. Certainly it should be on our website. It should be available as much as possible. And that's why we spend a lot of time doing promotion and advertising. In many cases, the consumer will evaluate alternatives. Most consumers will evaluate, particularly if it's a new need that they have just discovered they have. And that's why we want to stack up well against the competition. So, and then eventually there'll be a purchase decision. That purchase decision may happen quickly or may happen slowly, but we want to help that consumer along the way. And then, of course, there's post-decision behavior, which may seem strange. Actually, we do care about what consumers do after they've made the purchase, or after customers have made the purchase. It seems counterintuitive because we've got the payment, we've got the money, the check is cleared, we're good. But why do we care? We care for a number of reasons. One, we might be interested in repeat business. Most businesses have to survive on repeat business. Very difficult to very few businesses where you can survive without repeat business. Someone said, well, what about a funeral parlor? You only need one coffin in life or in death. Yeah, but the family will come back. That's what you want people to come back. And there you go. In addition, there's also what do people tell others about your product? Are they going to say good things? Or are they going to say bad things? Actually, people are 5 times more likely to talk about a product or service if they're unhappy. If they're angry or they're disappointed, they tell people. And that actually, I think you'll understand. That's fairly intuitive. When people are annoyed, they tell people about it. I remember I bought a car years ago, and within a week or so, the salesperson's calling me up, asking me if everything's okay. If there are any problems, they'll take it. They'll let us. They'll help me with it, whatever that problem is. There weren't any problems, but how many problems do you have with a new car? But they just wanted to, you know, ingratiate themselves and also make sure there are no problems. Make sure we're happy, because if people are unhappy, they tend to let the world know about it, especially now that there are online reviews. So the way consumers search for products varies as well. And I'm sorry, I have another grid here for you to look at. There are, on the vertical, you'll see that there are products which have major differences from one product to another, major product differences in the offerings between competitors. And there are others that have very little. There's very little difference between one product and a competitor's product. But there are also products which are more high involvement. They're more complex. They're more involved, and others that are low involvement. They're not particularly complex. They're fairly simple. So if we have high involvement products where there are major product differences between the offerings, we get complex buying behavior. And this is for products that are expensive. They're maybe risky, purchased infrequently, or highly expressive. What sort of products are these? Well, things like computers. Computers are complex. They may be expensive. Cars are certainly expensive, and they are purchased infrequently. I only buy a car every, I try to buy a new car as little as possible. Any product, of course, is risky, equipment or of something like that, then you want to really do your research there, and that means it's more high involvement. Fashion, of course, is about personal expression, and you probably maybe have done this yourself. You look through the store trying to find just the right clothing, just the right jacket, or just the right dress, or whatever it is. Because it expresses, it's very self-expressive. It tells the world a little bit about you. So there's that. Meanwhile, products where there, again, major differences, but they're kind of low involvement, are actually results in variety-seeking behavior. And these are products that are inexpensive, low risk, purchased frequently, and not particularly expressive. And what are some of the products like that might fall into this category? Things like candy and cookies. For instance, if I asked you what your favorite candy bar is, let's say your favorite candy bar is a Snickers. That's your absolute favorite. But will you always eat Snickers? No, you might one day instead just buy a Kit Kat bar or some other, Butterfinger or something like that. Why? Your favorite is Snickers. Why would you do that? Well, because we human beings like variety. Let's say your favorite food is, well, my favorite food is pizza. But what if I could only have pizza for the rest of my life? That would be pretty miserable. Only pizza, nothing else but pizza. Because we do like variety. We do like, and maybe you've had this experience where maybe you were served the same food over and over and over again. You get sick of it. Human beings like variety. And so, and therefore we should supply variety. In fact, many companies provide not just one product, but a variety of products, so people can switch. Like many of the candy and cookie and the snack companies offer a wide variety of products. So when you have that need for variety, they'll have something for you. And most products, at least consciously, will fall into one of these two categories: complex buying behavior or variety-seeking behavior. There are a couple other buying behaviors, but they're for products that have very little product differences between the offerings. So This is called, for those that are high involvement, you will probably engage in dissonance reducing buying behavior. And these are for products, again, that are expensive, risky, purchased infrequently, or highly expressive. And this might seem, and to me, the great example of this would be carpeting. Now, I suspect that many of you have not purchased a lot of carpeting, but carpeting is expensive. If you want, like in my house, I have wall-to-wall carpeting, and every manufacturer pretty much has all the colors, all the the cuts, but you're spending a lot of money, and I was spending a lot of money, and I want to make sure I wasn't making a mistake. And so you do your research. You see if there's, is there really a difference between this carpeting and that carpeting? You don't want to make a mistake. So you want to reduce that dissonance, that discomfort. So the last category, the low involvement products where there's little difference, again, inexpensive, low risk, and so forth. These are for products that you just buy over and over again. You just buy them habitually. There's not a lot of difference. They're inexpensive, so it's not a big mistake. You're not going to make a big mistake. And a couple examples I give you, maybe salt. You go in, you just buy the same old salt all the time, or even gasoline. Now, for some of these, there might be some pricing that might drive a little bit, but for instance, because I drive around New Jersey during the week to going to my various campuses, I know where where I've just figured out where the best gas stations are to go to, and I just go to my habitual gas stations. On a Tuesday, I go to a certain gas station. On Friday, I go to a different gas station because I'm in a different place. And it's just habitual. I don't even check the prices anymore because I know they're going to be the best prices in that area, but it's habitual. We don't think that much about it. So anyway, so those are some of the search behaviors, excuse me, that we would go through. Now, we also have new products that can come out. And by new product, I don't mean simply a new brand or a new flavor. I mean a completely new type of product. Mostly these would fall into technological areas. When the first iPhone came out, or the first CD player, or the first video recorder first came out. These were major disruptive new products, new technologies. So they're new versus a line extension, where it's like a new flavor of Coca-Cola or something like that. And we go through certain processes. First is to become aware of it. Oh, there's this new technology or this new type of product there. And then we develop interest in this product. Doesn't mean we want to buy it, but we're interested. And then we kind of evaluate it. We might take it for a test run. We might read reviews, whatever it takes to evaluate it. And then we try it in some way. Now, if it's an expensive product, we might buy one, one that we'd have to buy many of. We'd buy many of. We try it. Let's say it's a new type of food. Could be wouldn't be a technological product, but a new type of food. What was one that came out a while ago? It was a part croissant, part something else. I can't remember. Oh, the cronut. Yes, the cronut. So you try it. Or if it's something like a new type of car, you'll give it a test run. So you'll do it that way, and then eventually you either adopt it or don't adopt it. You buy it. You make it part of your life. And so some products become adopted and other products don't. Betamax is an example of a product that was never adopted. Um, or not broadly adopted. I'm sorry, it was adopted by some people. That was an old videotape system. So, but we go through this. We all go through this adoption process. These stages. Some people go through very quickly. Some people take a long time to go through. This is what you're seeing here is a normal distribution curve. It's a statistical. When you're measuring a lot of things, they will fall into this kind of distribution. So, in the center here, at the mean average, you will have the most things. So let's say, for example, you're measuring the distribution of men's shoe sizes. The average man's shoe, I believe, is a size 10, maybe a size 9.5, something like that. But the more men will take that size than anything else, and then some people, fewer, will take a slightly smaller size, maybe a 9, an 8.5. Some people will take more. I have a friend who has a size 17 shoe. He would be way down here to the right. So anything you measure, you can put into a normal distribution curve. And if you have taken a course in statistics, you will understand this quite readily. Anyway, so we can also measure how quickly people adopt new products. This first group, the first 2.5% of the population, they're called innovators. I don't actually like this name because they're not innovating, but these are people who adopt a product very quickly because it's new. They just love new things. I had two friends, Fred and Don. They would actually compete with each other. Who could be the first to get the newest thing? Well, it's always good to get customers, but I actually don't find this particular group that valuable. If I'm marketing a product, there will always be some people who will try it because it's new. That's nice, and we certainly appreciate their patronage. We'll take excuse me, we'll take their money, but I'm much more interested in the next group, which are called the early adopters. The next 13.5%. The early adopters are people who don't go quite as fast as the innovators, but they do evaluate quickly. And what's particularly valuable about them is they become opinion leaders. They have evaluated and they have made a decision, and they are respected by other people for the way they make decisions. And people may be early adopters in certain product categories, but not others. For instance, in my family, my brother-in-law is definitely an early adopter of any new electronic technology. He jumps right on it. He researches it intensely, and then he makes a decision and he buys it. He's, almost any electronic, particularly entertainment related technology, he's right on top of it. So, in other areas, somebody else might be the early adopter. This is followed by a very nice group called the early majority. And these are people who actually want to make sure somebody else is using it first. And they actually speak to the early adopters and say, is this product's okay? Okay. Oh, you're using it? Okay, fine. I'll use it. And so we like them. This is followed by the late majority. And the late majority are not comfortable with adopting a new product unless they see large numbers of people adopting it. So they're very conservative that way. They hold off a long time, and then they jump on the bandwagon, as it were. This last group, as you might guess, are called the laggards, the last 16%. These are people who very reluctant. They're set in their ways. They don't adopt new products easily. I think of my parents this way. For instance, they wouldn't get a CD player until they could no longer get their 8-track tape player fixed, their old way of listening to music. So and because they still have a CD. Well, my mother's passed away, but my father still has that CD player, and he won't get any sort of you know digital music player until he can no longer get his until his CD player dies. He has no interest in adopting new technologies, um, and that's the way it goes. However, there's always a different take on things. There is somebody realized that a lot of these laggards, at least in the music area, still had a lot of vinyl LP records, and they actually kind of went back to the old technology and improved it. They created turntables that will play old records, long LP or long playing records, but with better sound technology. So it wasn't so much getting to get a new technology, but adapting to their lack of jumping to a new technology. And actually, LP records do apparently have some superior aspects of sound. They're analog, so you have less distortion. It's kind of an interesting thing for if you're an audiophile. So, probably as I said, the most important group here is the second one, the early adopters. In fact, I remember various salespeople, with the new people, a new salesperson who gets into their territory, and the first thing they want to find out is who are the early adopters, who are the opinion leaders. Particularly if they're selling a business product, they're focused that way. Anyway, there are some factors that affect the adoption rate. One is with the new product, does it actually have a relative or significant advantage compared to what people are already using? VHS tapes came out years ago. People adopted them. Then somebody came out with Betacam tapes, or sorry, Betamax tapes. And was there a relative advantage? There was a relative advantage, but the problem was it wasn't easily communicated. It was only slightly better. Think of it like maybe only 5 or 10% better. It was a better picture for its time, but it wasn't enough that they could communicate that significant advantage or that advantage. Also, is it compatible with people's current lifestyles? How much do they have to change to adopt this new technology? CD players became very easily adopted because they were smaller than the LP players. You could plug them in, use them in the same way. You just unplugged one unit and plugged in another. That was fine. So if it doesn't require much change, it's much more likely to become if it's much more compatible with the lifestyle, it's much more likely to be adopted. Also, the question is, how complex is it? What's the learning curve? How much do I have to learn to use this new technology or this new product? And also divisibility, expense. How much is it going to cost me? There was a new video technology years ago called video disc, and it did have demonstrably better video picture and audio than VHS or Betamax or anything like that. The trouble is it was very expensive. A disc might cost as much as $100, with a movie on it, So it was a great technology, except it was just too expensive for people. So there we go. All right. Obviously you can't ask me any questions on this video, but in class, save up your questions and ask in class. All right. Take care.